Okay, thank you for being back on time. And I can notice that the microphone is finally the right height. I'm happy about it. I'd like to announce our second keynote of the day, Jutta Eckstein. Jutta will talk about company-wide agility.
Thank you for announcing me and for having me. And actually, you missed all the buzzwords, which I intentionally put into the title. So it's the Bossa Nova, which is a synthesis of beyond budgeting, open space, sociocracy, and Agile. So I couldn't find more buzzwords. So. Okay, but first of all, before I start, I really want to thank the sponsors. I do organize conferences myself, and I know that they won't happen without the sponsors, so I really think that's important to have them. So now, speaking of myself, so I want to give you a sneak peek where I'm coming from, so then you'll probably get a different perspective, or that would be my hope, what I'm telling you here. And where I'm coming from is kind of shown in the books I wrote. And, well, you have seen Eric's kind of journey or that timeline that went out there that resonated a lot with me. So I started as a programmer back in the times where OOP was a big thing. Then discovered in '97 extreme programming, and I thought, that's cool. And then around 2000, 2001, I started scaling that. The manifesto came out, so it was about scaling Agile. And that was the first book I published. I published that in 2004. And guess what? Nobody was interested in it. Because nobody thought about scaling, right? It was way too early. Anyway, then I found out that, well, all the scale projects I was working on, almost none of them was still co-located, so they were all distributed, and this kind of made my way into then writing about that, and then 2010 I wrote about distributed Agile development. And also that 2010, not so many people were interested in this one either. However, it's my journey. And so I went on and looked then more into what helps, what hinders Agile in an organization. So I looked more at the organizational perspectives, which is like the two other books you see there. So about cost of delay and organizational change. And now this is already it, so no more about me, but now you know where I'm coming from. Because I will not talk about these things. I talk about my latest thing, which is also covered in a book, and that's this, what we acronymed with Bossa Nova. I will get back to that right away. So, first of all, why? So I assume all of you are doing some Agile stuff somehow. Either you just started, or you do it for quite some time, or whatever. However, what we see is that companies really are facing a lot of different challenges right now. And those challenges they have a name. They are kind of put together, and they are called VUCA. So often people refer to that saying, like, we are actually living in a VUCA world right now, meaning everything we are doing is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And with that, a lot of the things we have done in the past, they just don't work anymore. So we can't plan and assume that we are just doing as planned and everything is fine. No, the thing is, the plan is done, and probably by planning, but at latest 2 weeks later, everything is not true anymore because the world has changed. The market wants something different, a different competitor has shown up, whatever, we need to be faster, or maybe the technology we thought we are using has died off completely. With that comes also the thing that you also heard before, there will also be more talks today about that, the digitalization challenge, which is that every company becomes a software company, or is already one, although it might not know it yet. So I spoke to some of the managers of BMW, I think it's at least 5 years ago. And that manager told me, you know what, we are actually not a car manufacturer anymore, we are a software company. And I'm pretty sure even now there are managers and other people in BMW who won't see it this way. They would say, like, of course, cars are what we are producing. However, that manager said at that point, software is the key differentiator between our product and other products, and it will be more and more so, and it's the thing that makes the difference. And I'm not saying they have a good way of doing it or whatever, I don't have any stake in it, except for, I didn't say that before, that I'm German, and so we are always happy if you buy our cars. And by the way, I don't have a car, so you have to buy them. Probably it's this. Okay, so what the VUCA world and that digitalization is actually asking for, it's asking for agile organizations. It requests companies to be agile. And now what I mean with that is not that we are applying Scrum all over the company. So it's not that, for example, the board of directors is running its board meetings with the Scrum Master and through a backlog. That, well, might help that meeting, but it doesn't really make the company any more agile. So this is not what we are looking for. What we are looking for is agile companies in the more literal sense, meaning agile as being responsive, fast, flexible, maybe nimble as well. And this is what's required from companies. And now, well, what is that? That's on the one hand also kind of beyond agile. Because what we know in the agile field is not enough here. And so we were reaching out. And the reaching out, there we ended up with the thing we now call Bossa Nova, also because we think it's cool. And because when we found those 4 different streams, and I will just go into these in a few seconds, and we played around with them, then we finally found a possibility to pronounce it, and that's why it's called Bossa Nova. Okay, so what are these streams? Or maybe also why those streams? Well, first of all, if you look at beyond budgeting, and Eric pointed that out as well, also in his keynote, that might be important. Think of it in a different way. If we have budgets based on a calendar year, how flexibly can you act to any market changes? So I see some people shaking their heads, because the thing is, if now something new comes up, or a competitor shows up, or your market is disappearing completely, your money is already in the different buckets, what has been decided, if you're unlucky, almost a year before, where the world was a different place. So we need to come up with a way of budgeting that allows us to deal with that VUCA world. Then looking at, which is probably harder to see, down to the left here, open space, which looks more into, do we actually make use of the innovative power of everyone we have on the team, or are we still coming up with job descriptions, hiring for those job descriptions, and then wonder why people are delivering exactly what they asked for in that job description, instead of looking what kind of innovation they all bring to the company. And then going to your right upper corner, Sociocracy, that looks more into the area of how do we actually make decisions? How is the power structured? And actually, power often means how we make decisions. And as long as that's centralized, we are just too slow for that VUCA world. So we need to do it somehow in a different way and hear everyone's voices. And then there's Agile, and I guess I don't need to speak a lot about Agile. However, so this was more like, what is it not, and I still want to dive into those 4 streams just a tiny little bit and give you a better glimpse what they offer. Well, and perhaps one more thing, they all exist for a long, long time. So this is not new. This is proven. This is used by many companies. It's not used in the combination so much. So the 4 streams together, that's the new thing. But every stream exists, well, I think most of them since the 70s. So it's, if you will, not a new thing. The combination is. Okay, looking at beyond budgeting. One problem that we have with beyond budgeting is that, well, that's in the name. It's kind of a similar problem we have with extreme programming or had, because people are not talking that much about it anymore because it was too extreme, too much programming, and therefore, well, didn't work out. And for beyond budgeting, it's kind of the same, that people think it's only about budgeting. However, the beyond budgeting people have a very strong idea about whatever you do with budget actually drives how you manage. Because if you are having a budget, for example, per calendar year, what you are doing automatically is a kind of a command and control thing, because you command out where does the money go to, therefore it's clear where do we put our efforts into, and then you control according to that budget. And so the budget really defines the management style, and that's one thing we often overlook in Agile as well, so that this is absolutely a kind of a constraint that we're seeing. Now, for giving you a peek into what Beyond Budgeting is offering, I want to use actually still something from the budget. And what they are saying is, well, if you look at budgets, what they really do is, a budget is fulfilling 3 purposes. And the first purpose it's fulfilling, it is answering the question, where are we heading? What is our goal? What are we aiming at? And that's called the target, or the targets. Then it's trying to answer, what do we think will happen over, for example, that calendar year or whatever period of time we're looking at, so that's the forecast. And then the third thing it tries to answer is, okay, now, where do we want to spend the money on? Which is called resource allocation. And I know I always have to be really careful, cautious in Agile conference, because whenever people hear resource, they're like, well, there are no resources, there are people. Which is true. However, we talk about finance here, really. We talk about money. Where does the money go to? And yes, it can go into investing into people, but it's just a general way. In which buckets does the money go? Okay, these are the 3 purposes. Once you understand that a budget really fulfills these 3 purposes, you can start dealing with those purposes in a different way. So you can start doing things differently, starting with the target. Maybe first that story. Well, we heard Eric saying that his dad really wanted him to sell insurances. A typical thing for somebody who sells insurances is that he gets a target. For example, I have no idea about insurances, but let's say, for example, that you have to sell 100 insurances per year. And if you do that, you get your bonus and you're very happy about that. Now, the thing is, what does it mean if you sell 100 insurances per year if your competitor sells 200 over the same time period? Probably that target wasn't really that good. And what about if your competitor sold only 20 insurances? Wow, that makes a difference. Now, speaking of that, that is VUCA. The time is changing. We cannot come up with an absolute target anymore. The target has to be flexible and adaptive and has to flow with all the changes that are going on. Or, in other words, it needs to be a relative target and not an absolute one. And that's not only true for any kind of sales thing, that's also true for what we are working on as developers. It's just true for any kind of target. It has to adapt and automatically adapt. Then for the forecast, well, the forecast, that's the thing where we really look like a year ahead or whatever. Well, as I said already, that probably doesn't make so much sense anymore. However, what we can do if we now know that it's a different purpose, we look at it, well, on a more regular basis. For example, we do a rolling forecast, or we do like an event-based forecast whenever something is happening, or we do it just as we kind of do it in Agile, that we have sprints or something and look at the forecast every whatever month or every 2 weeks and think, oh, has anything changed? Should we kind of invest in something else because we learned from the market this and that? So we do. And just starting with what we can do with resource allocation, we can do this dynamically, deciding on per need basis and not on, well, whatever we thought at one moment in time. And, well, which is also related to the target, but maybe I want to share that as well. So a friend of mine, she does something similar than selling insurances. Actually, I think she's selling credits for a bank. And she has these targets. Now what's happening for her, if she sees around that time of the year that there's no way that she will hit her target for the year, guess what she's doing? She's moving everything to the next year, what's coming in. Which isn't a good idea for the company, but maybe for her. And also the other way around, if around that time of the year she has already fulfilled her target, what she's doing is she moves it to the next year because you never know if you will make your targets next year. So this is actually, although I speak of it as targets, that's actually resource allocation. And it's a serious thing for a company. So a company often thinks with these kinds of tight budgeters that we can control better where the money is going to and so on, but just the opposite is true, at least nowadays with the vocabulary. So that's beyond budgeting. Now, looking at open space. And open space actually is a facilitation technique originally, and I don't want to go into details here. However, I want to highly recommend that you check it out. You might want to go to one of the unconferences that are popping up nowadays more and more. They use open space, and it's really a great means. And I don't want to go into details with that because I want to focus right away on what we mean here for companies, and that's called more something like organizational open space, meaning we allow is wrong, we invite everyone at any point in time to be innovative. Now this might not sound so strange, however what I see in companies happening most of the times is that we do like design thinking sessions, we have an innovation lab, we might have a think tank, and there's like a person who decides who will be innovative at what day. Isn't that weird? It starts that it's weird. How do you know that it's exactly you over here who will be our innovative people? And maybe you have a bad day and it would be better we would work with over here. So it just doesn't make any sense. So the thing is, that invitation for innovation should be out there at all times. And I can tell you how this looks. It looks as Gore-Tex, so W.L. Gore is the company's name, so Gore-Tex, the outdoor equipper, I guess you know them too, with the jackets and shoes and whatever all they do. This is how they implement all their strategies. It is anyone at any time can come up with a feature, a new product, anything, and if there are enough people saying, cool idea, let's do that, it's a go. So it's not a complicated process or anything, and it goes through whatever procedures till somebody says, oh yes, that might be good. That's all too slow. It is too slow nowadays. And it ignores like the full potential of everyone. So that's organizational open space. Maybe one more point to that. You might have read it. It says passion bound by responsibility. Of course, also for W.L. Gore, it's not about inventing, like, I don't know, new curtains for hotels or whatever I see here. Well, maybe it is, if it's kind of related to the strategy. But the responsibility is embedded in the strategy of the company, right? It's not like doing something completely weird, because then it might mean more starting a new company and do something completely different. Okay, that's that. Then sociocracy. And sociocracy is based on equivalence. I like that dash over the N, which is not on the front, it's the screen. Equivalence, and equivalence in that sense that we are always listening to all voices that we are having, because we know everyone brings a different perspective, and that perspective is really important for us to know about. And it starts with something about decision making. And decisions are made in sociocracy based on consent. Now, if you think about how decisions are made, there are different ways that come to mind, like maybe it's the boss saying, oh, we are doing it this way. So that's an autocratic decision, that's very quick. Sometimes it's implemented very slow because nobody buys into it. Then we have democratic decision makings, which is like majority based, right? Which is what we often do in retrospective also, dot voting, and where the most dots are, this is what we are doing. Works kind of well, and at least some cases. In other cases, not so much, because the people who are in minority are all ignored. We ask them, but then we say, well, we don't care. And then there are these special implementations of democracy. Sorry, I have to say that here. Nowadays I have to say that. Like that sometimes even the majority votes are ignored, like what we have seen in the presidential election in the US. So that can happen too. Okay, and then there's consensus, which is we ask everyone and say like, oh, do you like that decision? And well, no, well, I can't imagine something else, and it takes forever, right? And then we always feel like we are stuck, we are not getting anywhere. So this is consent, what we are talking about. Compared to, well, again, consensus. Consensus asks, well, do you like that decision? Are you in favor of it? Do you agree with it? Versus consent asks, can you accept it? Is that decision within your range of tolerance? And if it is, we are going for it. If it's not in your range of tolerance, what you're saying then is why you think that decision is putting our joint goal at risk. So it's still not kind of, well, it's not in my range of tolerance because I just don't like it and I would like to see something else or so. It is always looking at what is our joint goal and how does this decision affect our joint goal or not. And maybe two more things to that decision making, and if this is the only thing you're taking away from this talk, then this would be already great. So one thing is, don't start looking for the best ever decision if you want to make a decision with a team, because you don't know what best is. You never know it in advance. You might know it in hindsight, probably also not in hindsight because you haven't tried that other thing that might have been better. Look for a decision that is, and that's the slogan coming with Sociocracy, that is good enough for now, safe enough to try. And go with that. Don't lose time by kind of circling around and finding, oh, maybe this would be better. No, make your step forward and start. The other thing, I said like two things you might take away from that is, often it helps to come to a good decision if we put a time box to it. If we say, what about if we try that for 3 months and then we revisit, and then maybe we have learned something and follow a different path. That's, even if you are not doing a decision based on consent, very helpful. My absolute recommendation. Okay, we are not done with Sociocracy. There's that other thing where what Sociocracy is focusing on, it's on hierarchy or the structure. So a hierarchy, kind of as we know it, is always top to bottom. So information flows top to bottom, power flows top to bottom, decisions flowing top to bottom. And if you look at this from an Agile perspective, and well, I kind of also point you in that direction in case you have the possibility to see that picture. There are the arrows going in one direction, and from an Agile perspective, what's definitely missing is the feedback loop. There's no arrow going up. And so Sociocracy is exactly offering that. It offers to come up with a so-called double link from every level in the hierarchy. There is somebody elected as a representative or delegate, and then one level higher up in the hierarchy. So you have for every level in the hierarchy, you have at least two people. One is the appointed leader, boss, manager, whatever, and the second one is the bottom-up elected one. And they both have the same say because every decision is based on consent. The good thing is you can just start where you are, because you start with the hierarchy you're having, and then you slowly introduce your double links, your uplinks, for having a feedback embedded in the structure, or in other words, the feedback can't be ignored anymore because it's embedded in the structure. Agile, I think I don't need to say anything about that. You know that. Let's move on. So what does it mean if we have those different streams? How do Agile organizations look like? And I want to bring a few examples. This is an example from one of my clients I've been working with. It's not a brand new example. I guess it's maybe 10 years ago or so. It's an ERP producer, not the big German one, kind of mid-sized Swiss one in that case. And there was a time where we thought that we need to restructure the teams in order to allow them to better self-organize. So by having them focusing on a joint goal, which is a product area or a feature area, that would be a good idea for them to better self-organize. And we had about, I'm not sure, 110, 120 people there. And what we did was we put out flip charts in the auditorium where we said, okay, these are the different feature areas we are seeing, and we were also saying a little bit what kind of skills we think should be in there, and then people signed up. And at the beginning, they signed up just, I'm not sure, probably at the back, yeah, you have screens in between. These are sticky notes, so they just did it cautiously at the beginning, and then there were some discussions going on back and forth. And over time, it all settled, and over time, I think we had it out for 2 weeks. It settled, and then they used really solid markers to say, like, I'm working on that team, I like it, and I would like to be the product owner for that because I think I can do that, and it's my whatever, either expertise or the thing I want to learn. And so self-selecting teams, which leverages some of the things you just heard, for example, open space as well. And when I did this, so at the time, it was the first time I did that, self-selecting teams again, so it's at least 10 years ago. And I feared maybe there are areas nobody wants to work on. You know, they're just some boring topics. Interesting enough, and not surprisingly maybe, people are responsible. It didn't happen. People were ensuring that all topics are covered. Then also another fear I had was, oh, and probably then all the seniors and experts are finding each other and they're like the cool teams, and then we have a few laggard teams where nothing will happen. Also didn't happen. People were responsible enough, they found it out, and then they switched to another team and they discussed with each other. Very cool. I've done that since then many times, and in case you're wondering, it works also very well in a distributed setting. There we just put it on the wiki or Confluence, whatever you're having, and people sign up and move their names away and talk to each other or write it down, whatever their rationale is. Very good, works fine. So that's one example that's easily be done, I think. Another example is this one. I don't know, can you, yeah, you might be able to read it. Who knows that kind of thing? Yeah, who likes that kind of thing? Anyone? Oh, come, I don't see any hands. So, the thing with this example is, well, you know, we are all trusted, for example, to run million-euro projects or contribute to them and be responsible for them in some way, but we are not trusted to book a decent hotel for ourselves. There are a lot of procedures around that, what's allowed and what's not, and you only get reimbursed if you do it like this and not like that, and so on. So many restrictions because, and that's the signal or the message sent, because the companies don't trust us. They think we will spend the money really like crazy, do funny things. Okay, so, and I said I want to bring you examples, so this is not the example is the other thing. The example is from a company I know quite well. They're called IT Agile. It's a German company. You see already it's an Agile company. However, they also had these procedures in place because this is what you ought to do. But there came a time where people said, like, this isn't really Agile what we are doing there. We should do it in a different way. And they came up with exactly 3 principles. The first one was, whenever you are traveling and you're spending money, the way you spend it, it has to be legal. I thought that's good. The second thing is, whenever you're spending money for your travels, it has to be sensitive. However, nobody defined ever what that means. Then the third rule is, when you're spending the money, you should take care of yourself. Again, nobody defined what that means. Now, I just recently, like 2-3 weeks ago, I talked to the CEO of that company, IT Agile, and well, I said already, I think I said it's a German software company, and they're operating within Germany, I think, only or mostly, and that's why this should be the ICE train, the ICE, our kind of high-speed train in Germany, and so, which means they are going by train typically. And that's why they use that also for pointing out their new principles. And he told me, what they found was that 1/3 of the people are actually traveling first class and 2/3 are traveling second class. And I gave him already that look. And he said, well, no. It's not that me, like the CEO or any like other CXOs or someone are traveling first class, it's the consultants. And he also said, that's fine for everyone, because these are the people who travel the most, and taking care for yourself means something different than for somebody who is traveling just occasionally. And so it's all fine. So, which also says you don't have to come up with principles that are the same for everyone, because that's not the same for everyone in the end, right? So, cool idea. There's another company, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, and they came up with only one principle. Gets even better. And the one principle is not only referring to travel expenses, but to all kinds of expenses, is whenever you spend money, you put on the intranet, how much do you spend on what? And you guess what's happening. If Jutta spends an outrageous amount of money for whatever, I get questions. Okay, let's go on. So we have some underlying values here that drive these kinds of behaviors, and you also heard before how important values are. So we have transparency, self-organization, continuous learning, and constant customer focus. These are the things driving all of these behaviors. And I give you also a definition to that. So, and maybe we need to do that. Can I do that? And you have time to read it, perhaps, if this works. It doesn't, yes? No, it doesn't work. Okay, doesn't matter. But maybe still, you had time to read it. What is, I think, interesting is, especially if you look at transparency, very often this is discussed the most, because people fear, well, what's the use, or we can make everything transparent, and because then whoever sees whatever. The thing is not to make everything transparent. Actually, I'm not interested in everything, because there's too much information overload anyway. Yet, I would like to get all the information I need for coming up with a decision. And therefore we need to reduce the barriers for kind of finding this information. That's the important thing, right? So it's not kind of doing it like that. Okay, so this is this. The other thing is we need to have a different perspective on how we look at the org chart. So that's a typical org chart. So we have like shareholders, they say, well, you have to be profitable, and then the board, and the CEO is representing the board, and then we have on the one way production, creating the value, on the other hand we have support, which is like HR, finance, all of that, helping to get the company running. So this is kind of a traditional or classic perspective. Now, another perspective which I see in these companies where I brought these examples from is something like this. It starts with, there's a value center. There are cross-functional teams producing, creating value, and they're in the middle, and everyone sees them as this is our focal area, this is what we are doing. Then to your left, we still have the thing that you saw before, because we still have to make money, otherwise we won't survive, right? So this is the connection to the board, further out to the shareholders. To your right, that's probably also obvious, well, there should be the connection to the customer, and it should be, actually, I point you to that right away. Those arrows, they're always in the same, they have the same strength. So this is a balanced relationship, reaching out and coming in. So we want to learn from the market, but we also want to kind of ensure that the value is delivered to the market frequently. And then we have those support functions still, which ensures that everything is kind of in the, like, whatever regulations there are and so on. So this is also, but it is aligned with creating value. And then you might wonder what's at the top. That's what we call art and spirit. And the art and spirit refers a bit to what Eric said, like the vision has to be clear. My word is more like we need to know what's the purpose for our company. Or kind of also what I said with W.L. Gore, where I said passion bound by responsibility. It's not that we can do anything. That doesn't make sense for that company. It all has to be kind of aligned. And actually this can be going against what the customer is asking for, because sometimes the customer might ask us for things that's against our values. If there's, I don't know, they ask us to be corrupt, maybe that's not going together with our ethics, who knows. Okay, so that's this. And now, how do they do, where do they start is first the thing, or where can you start? This is actually a characteristic of any kind of company. Strategy, structure, process. This is how companies are defined. And for a long time, we all thought that strategy follows structure. And that's why a lot of reorganizations always happened. But nowadays, we know that also structure follows strategy. And you see it on the picture, process follows structure and vice versa. So you can also do searches on this, and you find different research out there, or case studies where this is proven. So the good news is, it doesn't matter where you are starting. You can start anywhere. Start changing the processes, the strategy, the structure, no matter what. So that's all fine. So you can start anywhere is the key message. Now the other question is, how do you start? And the how is kind of, well, also here Eric was talking a little bit about experimentation, and this is what I'm getting here. So we reflect where we are right now. And then we compare to, like, what have others done? Maybe you like the thing that Agile did, and therefore you do it as well. You try an experiment, and you reflect again where you are. And at best, you then publish about that, because if they wouldn't have told me, you wouldn't have known it either. So we need to talk about these things. And I have seen that the time is up, and actually I can't, because the machine is over there, I can't go and adapt my slides. Therefore, this is the example of the IT Agile thing, and it's a probe that's called Is Trust Cheaper? And you see the background definition is like, okay, we see that travel expenses, burdensome, you all said that when I asked you, well, it's frustrating, it's not working. Then you come up with a hypothesis saying like, okay, we imagine that things will change if we show the trust, and trust in the end will be cheaper than having all these procedures in place. And then you start with an experiment. So a probe is a combination of a background definition, a hypothesis, and one and several experiments. And I want to invite you to come up with your own probes. And I know that the time is up, and I still want to share that. This is an example from a bank. And this should be the room of the board of directors. I haven't been there, so it's my imagination how that room looks like. And it might look completely different. However, this bank decided to, well, remove the table and see what's happening. That was their probe. And what they found was that the communication was way more open and honest than while the table was in there. And also the communication to the rest of the company was more open and honest than before that. And I don't imagine you are all on the board of directors, but my point here is it's a small change. It's just removing a table. It doesn't cost anything. It's not a big thing. And so that's my other big message. So you can start anywhere, and you can start very small to make a huge difference. And I know why you are saying I'm out of time, because we started 5 minutes late. That's why I'm speeding up so much. But I still try to finish quickly. Okay, so what actually really is happening is that people come up with their own probes. It's not so much, well, of course it's easier if you can compare what have other companies done, and therefore we do that as well, and maybe that helps us as well. But what's really the case is you come up with your own experiments for your situation, and hopefully you talk about it, publish about it, and if it's only within your company, that's already big, but it's even better if you go across and tell it somewhere else, so other people, other companies can learn from your experiments. So that's kind of the really important thing. So in essence, really, what company-wide agility or bossa nova is that you keep trying, experimenting, learning, changing, all of that. And this is what or how we understand agile organizations, or also maybe business agility, or I don't know, any kind of company that can survive and thrive in the VUCA world. So I made up a few minutes from how we started late. Well, they were waving at me like crazy, which made me nervous. Yeah, that's true, that's your job, and you did it well. And so this is kind of what I talked you through. So there are values driving all of that. This is what you see on the left. There's a different perspective on the organization by looking at what is it that actually is creating value. And you know what? It can be a hierarchy here. No, it's not a problem. It's more a perspective on who is creating actually the value and what's the most important thing here. Then you can start anywhere. It doesn't matter, strategy, structure, process, anywhere. And the most important thing is probably, I think, the keep probing. Never stop. Never stop. Always come up with a new hypothesis. Try. Where would you lead you this? How would that improve your actual situation in all the different perspectives? So, and I owe you, I guess, the last thing about the bossa nova. So bossa nova actually is a style of music, and it's a fusion of samba and cool jazz. And in that way, we also think it's a fusion, what we have here. The other thing is, bossa nova is also a dance. And as a dance, you adapt to the music that's played and also to the people on the dance floor. But you also influence the music that's played and the other people on the dance floor. So and this is the other thing that we see with that. And the last thing is bossa nova in Portuguese, maybe there are some Portuguese-speaking people here, means new trend, new wave. And I think this is what we need in this VUCA world. So, thank you very much.